Welcome to Talking Water. This one's on water, on efficient outdoor watering. I'm very excited about this one. I kind of geek out about this one myself, and so I'm very excited about it. My name is Tom Hickman. I'm the CEO of Tualatin Valley Water District. And the format of today's event is a brief presentation followed by a moderated question and answer period. For those accessing the event online, you can type your questions into the chat, which is located with the talk bubble icon. Tualatin Valley Water is a public agency, so the recording of this meeting is a public record and will be available on TVWD's website and YouTube channel after the event. It is my pleasure to welcome your speakers and two customer service experts who will be available to answer your questions today. I'm going to start by introducing two subject matter experts. Mike Edine is our field customer service lead. Mike has been with TVWD for 18 years, holding a variety of positions, which has given him a great understanding of how the district works. That really helps to have this very broad and comprehensive knowledge when it comes to helping our customers. So thanks, and Mike will be very helpful for this conversation. Carissa Sosa is TVWD's customer service and billing supervisor. Carissa joined TVWD in 2019. She has over a decade of experience in the banking and human service industries. Carissa holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Business Administration. I'm also excited to have Carissa speak to all of you and be able to help answer your questions. She's very knowledgeable and very helpful with our customers. Your main speaker today is Steve Carper. Steve Carper joined TVWD in 2006. He serves as our conservation technician, which focuses on commercial accounts and coordination of TVWD's conservation programs. Steve's professional background includes over 25 years in the Willamette Valley landscape industry with experience in construction, irrigation, and maintenance. He served 2 terms on the Oregon State Landscape Contractors Board and is a certified landscape irrigation auditor. Steve holds degrees from the University of Oregon in geography and landscape agriculture and graduate certificates from Portland State University in geographic information science and the business of craft brewing. I always remind people, great water makes great beer. So it's a natural connection. Outside of work, Steve enjoys brewing beer semi-professionally and at home. He and his wife, Debbie, live in Beaverton and are the proud parents of a 9-month-old son. So I am going to turn this over to Steve and let him educate us all on outdoor water use. Steve.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon to talk about efficient outdoor water use. We've got a lot to cover in a short amount of time, and hopefully we'll leave a good amount of time for discussion at the end. So let's dive on in without further ado. Today's agenda, we'll start out addressing what is outdoor water use and why is it important. We'll move into how efficient outdoor water use is beneficial to our residential customers specifically. We'll talk about some of the most common outdoor watering problems that I encounter as the conservation tech every summer working with our customers. We'll review some of the conservation services and resources that are available to our TVWD customers. We'll segue into looking at some of the emerging technologies that we're starting to see in this sector, and we'll wrap it up by discussing some of our planning for the future, and we'll finish with Q&A and hopefully some good discussion with our attendees. Just as a quick reminder, this presentation is definitely geared towards our residential customers, so we're not We're not focusing on commercial property managers, multifamily property managers. If we have those type of folks in the audience, please feel free to contact me directly. My contact information was on the first slide, and we'll send that out afterwards, and always happy to be a resource. But I imagine you have a home, so it may be valuable to stick around and hear what we have to say and join the conversation. So what is outdoor water use and why is it important? Well, today we're really going to focus in on outdoor residential irrigation, and specifically, we're going to zero in on the use of automated sprinkler systems on the residential level. We'll have plenty of time. Again, if that doesn't pertain directly to you, you may get some value out of the discussion and be able to chime in again with your questions at the end. But chances are pretty good if you do have a landscape irrigation system, chances are pretty good you're overwatering. And so we want to talk about the different challenges that most folks face and provide some solutions to hopefully help you address them. But before we dive in, we want to talk a little bit about why it's important to the district as well as our customers. Because landscape irrigation uses 25 to 50% of the treated potable water produced in Oregon, depending on where you are in the state. In our area, it tends to be more in the neighborhood of about 30%, but in the more arid regions, it gets up around 50 to 60%. And I'm sure coming from Ben, Tom can attest to that. So really, whether they realize it or not, landscape irrigators are really, partners in helping us to manage the region's water supply. And because as much as 50% of the water that we apply to our landscapes is wasted just due to inefficiencies caused by conditions such as poorly designed or constructed systems, worn and damaged components, and poorly managed sprinkler systems, there really is a tremendous opportunity for improved water use efficiency in our residential yards and gardens, while also maintaining healthy and beautiful landscapes. So we all love the quality of life that we have here in Oregon, the Portland area, and specifically Tualatin Valley Water District. It's a big part of why born and raised like myself choose to stay here, and why folks from all around the country and around the world choose to make this area their home. The critical resource that sustains our quality life is our safe, abundant, and reliable water supply. Fortunately, our region is not in a water supply crisis. However, as this spring has been one of the driest on record, it's a sobering reminder that we all need to use our water resources efficiently to sustain all the beneficial uses that we enjoy, things like public health, public safety, habitat, and recreation, just to name a few. So this graph really illustrates nicely the inverse relationship between water availability and demand during the summer, also known as outdoor watering season, that when water demand is at its peak, water availability tends to be at or nearing its lowest point. As my colleague Andrea mentioned the other day, I thought quite succinctly, summer is hot and water is refreshing. And we don't see that trend changing in the near future, and we don't really want to. So this relationship has a significant implications for TVWD as in terms of being water providers and our customers as ratepayers. Water providers need to build and maintain our distribution systems to meet peak day demands throughout our system. If we're able to maintain or reduce these peak day demands, sort of indicated by the top of the graph here, then we can offset or delay the building or expanding of expensive infrastructure to handle that additional distribution capacity, which has real impacts on our basic rates that all of our customers pay all year round. Peak seasonal usage due to the summer watering is really important to individual customers, not only in terms of being good stewards of our water resources, but in terms of managing the cost of your water bills. Outdoor watering can easily double or triple the average water use of a typical single-family residence. And TVWD has a two-tiered rate structure to incentivize efficient water use. The second, or block 2 rate, applies to any water use that's in excess of 28 CCF or 100 cubic feet, which is our basic billing unit. So if you're currently, for example, using the system average of 14 CCF per 2-month billing period, and your water use happens to triple to say 42 CCF, 14 units will be billed at the more expensive block 2 rate. And so it's that kind of dynamic, therefore, that makes managing your outdoor watering to reduce that seasonal peaking and perhaps avoiding block 2 rates really provides an opportunity to have a significant opportunity to reduce the cost of the water portion of your bill. So how does efficient outdoor water use benefit our customers? Well, as we alluded to in the previous slide, customers can minimize waste and avoid unnecessarily high water bills. And here are some images of just the types of things that we really are trying to avoid in our efficient use. But these are the types of things that I encounter on virtually every site that I visit in the summertime. Healthier plants and grass are another key result. Providing the adequate amount of water keeps plants healthy and green and helps avoid disease and pest infestation. Overwatering is a leading cause of plant, particularly turf or grass disease, and pests tend to want to congregate where there is adequate or plenty of water supply. So when we water excessively, it creates the conditions that are conducive to those types of issues. The reduced leaching of expensive fertilizers from soils that occurs when we overwater, kind of combining with minimizing runoff that is a major problem with excessive irrigation. Runoff is a major contributor to pollutants to our surface water that can strain our treatment systems and pollute groundwater. Being efficient with your irrigation system and having them finely tuned is going to help eliminate water damage to your buildings and your hardscapes like asphalt, pavement, concrete walks, wood siding, and fencing. Those types of surfaces, can sustain significant damage just by a little bit of overspray or consistent runoff. After years and years, you can probably see it in your own hardscapes if you take a closer look, or you may have had to deal with those types of repairs already. And again, from a stewardship perspective, it's just the right thing to do. If you're taking an approach to water efficiently, you can feel good about being a good steward of an essential common resource and help your water utilities control costs and your community to be more resilient. So diving right into some of the most common issues that I see in my work with our customers, far and away, the biggest issue that I encounter year to year is poor irrigation scheduling. And if I could, make sure that you have one takeaway from today, it would be if you have an automatic irrigation system to read your manual. That's your homework assignment for this summer. It's I compare them oftentimes to, and I'll date myself here, to VCRs and DVD players. I should maybe say Blu-ray, in that they're ubiquitous. Everybody has these things, but very few people know how to program them accurately. And most manuals, if you don't know where they are or have lost it over time, can be downloaded online now. So again, just really important to familiarize yourself with how these things function, and then go through the program to make sure that it's set properly, and then store your manual in a place. Oftentimes folks will just tuck it behind the device or tuck it into the door if you have a door on your controller, just so that it's easily accessible for future reference. These devices, while they have a really high degree of functionality in terms of multiple programs and multiple start times, in many cases there are somewhere between 2 to 4 programs available, and you can sort of see on this little switch here, there's program A, B, and C. So this device has 3 programs, and generally each program has as many as 4 start times. And why that again provides a high degree of functionality and customization in your schedule if you have a newly establishing landscape, or just various types of plant material that have different water requirements. That's fantastic, but it also creates the condition or the potential to apply as much as 16 times the amount of water that you intended if you misprogram these things. And you may think I'm exaggerating or kidding, but I run into this issue all the time because you're dealing with such a small LCD screen. It's really easy to get confused switching in between programs A, B, or C, and inadvertently setting each program to have multiple start times. And the next thing you know, again, you've got programs set to go off 7 days a week, 3 times a day, and your water bill ends up being 3 times as expensive as you were anticipating. So it's, again, I can't emphasize it enough. Understand how your controller works, verify that you've got a good schedule and that you don't have a redundant schedule that's gonna create problems for you. The best solution in terms of what we have to offer currently is to consider upgrading these controllers to what we call the WaterSense labeled weather-based irrigation controllers, and you can get a $50 rebate from TVWD to do so. And we'll talk a little bit more about the rebate later, but it's really a great way to sort of take a lot of the non-intuitive guesswork out of setting these programs. It eliminates a lot of the math or calculations that you should be doing with this type of controller to actually set a good, efficient schedule. And it really just is the best way to apply the appropriate amount of water across the irrigation season, without having to make manual adjustments. Just as a quick reset for those that may be just joining us, again, welcome to Talking Water, Efficient Outdoor Water Use. I'm Steve Carper, Conservation Technician, talking to you about outdoor watering systems and tips for doing that efficiently. When the presentation ends, we will take your questions, which you can type into the chat feature. It looks a lot like the bubble down here with the question mark. So please do submit your questions and we will address them at the end of the presentation. So moving on, another very common, or the next most common issues that I encounter are leaks in terms of broken pipes, damaged sprinklers, and nozzles. Now, some leaks, like the geyser that we see in the photo, are more obvious than others. And a big part of the problem in finding these issues is that oftentimes we, on the advice of folks like myself, we set our schedules to operate in the very early morning hours when we aren't awake to actually see how our systems are operating. And so as a consequence, we don't always catch these types of leaks as early as we might. So it's really important to actually observe how each zone in your system is functioning at least a couple times across the course of the system, so that you can make any repairs as soon as possible and again avoid excessively high water bills. It's a really good idea to keep an assortment of extra nozzles that you use, and perhaps an extra sprinkler head body, because these things get damaged. Landscapes are dynamic environments, and there's lawnmowers, edgers, kids, dogs, all sorts of things that can damage your equipment and create the need for some regular seasonal maintenance. It's a good idea if you're so motivated to learn how to make PVC pipe repairs. That's the underground piping that provides water from the main and the meter out to your sprinkler nozzles. Or if you're not comfortable with that sort of DIY project, have a licensed irrigation contractor that you can call on for more complicated repairs and service. Another very, very common thing that we encounter are misaligned sprinklers in terms of sunken, tilted, or sprinklers that may be spraying in the wrong direction. These are really simple solutions and easy fixes. You'll generally just need a small hand spade or a very small flathead screwdriver. And in the case of sunken or misaligned sprinklers, you can just carefully dig out the soil around your sprinkler heads and then gently raise or straighten the sprinkler so it's basically pointing vertically, and then pack the soil back down around the sprinkler head and make sure that your nozzle is oriented properly. It's nice on most sprinkler systems that have been built within the last 20 years or so. rather than being fixed to a rigid pipe throughout the system, which can make minor adjustments really difficult. Most sprinklers are attached to what are called a flex joint, or it's a piece of flexible polyethylene tubing which connects to the PVC, which allows you at least a small degree of flexibility or adjustment if you need to raise the head. In this example, in the sprinkler on the right, this head has become sunken and is now obstructed by the grass, and so the spray pattern is not as effective as it once may have been. And in this tilted sprinkler, it's causing the spray to basically be directed straight down into the compost layer here, as opposed to the plant material where it's actually going to do some good. So a couple really easy fixes there with just a small hand spade. Over here on the right, we see another really common issue with a misaligned spray head, and these changes can be made by simply grabbing a hold of this riser that pops up out of the sprinkler body when the system is functioning. And these sprinklers are actually designed to allow you to simply twist to the left or the right, and you'll hear a ratcheting sound. That's normal. You're not doing any damage. And you can simply twist that neck, not torque it side to side laterally. That you can pretty easily do some damage there, but just get things secured and twist it so that you reorient the spray to be hitting things that are intended to. I'm pretty confident in this situation that the siding doesn't require much supplemental watering over the season. And I would also question in this case whether a mature tree is going to require much supplemental water. So, in a situation like this, once you have a sprinkler realigned, evaluate what's actually being watered there. Is it now just bark dust? Is it anything that really requires water? Perhaps now that plant material has matured, that's an opportunity to actually eliminate that sprinkler, or at least turn it down as much as possible. And that's another very simple adjustment with a small flathead screwdriver. At the very top of the nozzle here, there's a tiny little screw that you can turn clockwise. And again, while the system is operating, so you can see the water flowing, turn that little screw clockwise until the flow of water either turns off or is diminished down to just a very, very small trickle. And that coincidentally is also how you just make simple adjustments to the radius or the distance that the water is flying out from the nozzle if you have a situation where you have overspray onto a hardscape or a fence, or you just need to reduce the radius down. Just simply turn that little screw clockwise, and you can, in most cases, get things dialed into a more appropriate radius. Another common thing that we see in residential and commercial landscapes alike is sprinkler nozzles that are not of a similar type, which results in a unmatched precipitation rate, or the distribution of water across the area that you're trying to irrigate. It's really not a good practice to combine different types of sprinklers or nozzles on the same zone. And that's because different types of sprinklers generally have much different water application rates, which makes it really difficult, if not impossible, to apply water evenly to a given area. The result is that part of the zone either gets overwatered or underwatered, depending on which type of sprinkler your schedule is based on. And this often in turn results in excessive run times to compensate for the deficiency of rotors compared to spray. And we can kind of illustrate in this graphic to the right here, where you can really see how the precipitation rates or the water application rate is dramatically different. In a pop-up spray head, which is what you can see sort of in the middle of this turf area, and this is a very typical device that we see that is putting out water in a set pattern or set arc of either generally quarter circle, half circle, or a full circle. And these very generally have a application rate of about 1.5 inches per hour within the arc that it's defined for. Whereas if a single stream rotor, which you see here in the foreground, generally is designed to cover a much larger area with this oscillation single stream of water. So for the given area, the application rate is dramatically less than the pop-up spray head. So again, this is like an unmatched precipitation rate, which makes it really difficult for good uniformity and optimal application. So the solution here is to convert to one or the other. You know, it's more a matter if you don't have good spacing issues, then going with the rotors, if you have adequate water supply, is probably the better choice. The exception to that rule would be with the newer multi-stream rotating nozzles, which oftentimes are compatible on a pop-up sprinkler body. Because they have again a much lower application rate, you can sometimes get away with applying one of those nozzles to those sprinklers on the same zone as a rotor, with less work required necessarily to switch out the entire sprinkler head. Sometimes, and typically on a large rotor, the inlet is a 3/4 inch thread as opposed to a 1/2 inch thread on a typical pop-up sprinkler. So there's a little more work involved to change out the entire sprinkler body to a rotors, and therefore, you know, the simply switching out the nozzle to a multi-stream rotating nozzle may be a simpler approach and can be appropriate in terms of the application rate and a good uniformity and a good result. Another very common outdoor water use that we see on our irrigation systems is issues related to pressure, both high pressure and low pressure. Domestic water supply static pressure often tends to exceed the recommended pressure for typical spray heads, which we see in the upper picture here. And this can cause what we call high pressure misting, which results often in as much as 30% of the water you're trying to apply ending up somewhere other than where you intended on your plants. Just a slight breeze can, you know, capture that highly atomized or misted water off to another area that is not where, you know, obviously in this picture we're just intending to water the plant around the signs, but we're getting a good portion of the turf as well. So an easy solution to high pressure misting is installing what we call pressure regulating sprinkler heads. So those types of heads actually have pressure reducing devices built inside that reduce the application pressure at the source to about 30 psi, which is the recommended range for that type of sprinkler nozzle. Another seemingly installation solution to a high pressure is to install pressure compensating filter screens. Now, it's a very simple installation, but picking the correct screen can be a little bit complicated. So it's a good thing to review with a professional, or at very least someone knowledgeable at the wholesale supply house. They're very familiar with how these products work, and if you can explain to them your specific condition, they can help you select the proper filter screens that can help you mitigate these solutions. You can also address high pressure situation at the electric valve, and that will reduce the pressure to an appropriate state throughout an entire zone. Or you can also install pressure regulating valves on your entire system. So there's, you know, different levels of ways to approach these high pressure conditions depending on the scope and your budget and your appetite to take that on. So lots of different solutions for that problem, but again, a big waster that we see very common just due to the nature of supply and where these sprinklers are designed to perform optimally. Just in general, the pressure ranges for typical sprinklers for pop-up sprays The ideal range is 15 to 30 psi, which is pretty low considering, you know, our general range or ideal range throughout the district is somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 psi. So right there you can see there's generally an opportunity to reduce that for optimum performance. With single stream rotors and multi-stream rotors, they generally have a greater range of pressure to where they can perform well. For the rotors, it's anywhere from 25 to 65 psi, and for the multi-stream rotors, it's anywhere from 30 to 50 psi. And it's always just good to verify that with a what's called a nozzle performance chart. And depending on what variety you have, typically most folks in our area have some of the big three manufacturers that are, you know, Rainbird, Hunter, or Toro. You can go online and download those charts to get an idea of where your product falls ideally on the ideal pressure spectrum, and then how you can address that. Down below, we see it's not as common, but it is something that we run into when a system has been sort of overbuilt, or there's too many sprinklers on a given zone relative to the available flow for the site. And this is actually a result of low pressure. And what happens is, instead of, you know, coming through at a good velocity and dissipating in an effective manner over the area that you're trying to irrigate, you get sort of a weak stream that really just tosses all of the water out to the very edge of the radius and a little bit right in close to the head. So it's just not giving you good coverage in the area that's being irrigated, and you can see the result. Once you get into the heat of summer, you just end up with the big brown eyes in the middle of your landscape. The solution to these low pressure situation is to first of all, you know, evaluate the entire zone. And as we mentioned earlier, if there are areas that are good candidates where you can eliminate any sprinklers and thereby creating more flow to the other heads, that's your first best option. Or the next thing to do is evaluate the types of nozzles that you have in the rotors and downsize them, or make sure that they're appropriately sized. When you purchase single stream rotors, each sprinkler body will come with what's called a nozzle tree. And here's an example over to the right. And you're provided with as many as a dozen options for nozzles that you can install within that sprinkler. And what may be happening here on the left is that, you know, somebody may have inadvertently picked out, well, gosh, this one looks good. That's the biggest one. It's going to put down the most water. But, you know, you may not have adequate flow to accommodate that type of flow in the nozzle. So you may need to downsize to anywhere, you know, it probably goes down to as little as half a gallon per minute with the smallest orifice, up to as much as perhaps 8 gallons a minute, depending on the type of rotor that you have. So, you know, consider downsizing until you find a flow rate for all of the different nozzles that is within the available flow that you have for your site. And you may ask, well, how do I know what is the available flow for my site? Well, the easiest way is what we call the bucket test, where you take 5-gallon bucket and get it, find a spigot, outdoor hose spigot that is as close to the water meter as possible. Turn on that spigot full blast and put your 5-gallon bucket under there for a minute if you can accommodate that flow, or 30 seconds, and then extrapolate to figure out how many gallons per minute do I have available for any given zone. And that's sort of your upper limit in terms of how many gallons per minute you have to irrigate. And then you use that to set your parameters. So if I, for example, determine that I've got 12 gallons per minute for each zone, and I've got 4 sprinkler heads, then the most I can have flowing through any given sprinkler at one time is 3 gallons per minute. So I want to make sure that I select the appropriate nozzle that is 3 gallons per minute or less. So moving into some of the rebate opportunities that we provide to help folks incentivize moving to better technology, we just want to make you aware of the WaterSense labeled irrigation or weather-based controller, also known as a smart controller. TVWD offers a $50 rebate to offer this type of controller. We also offer a rebate of $3 per nozzle for these what are called multi-stream, multi-trajectory rotating nozzles. And these are the multi-stream rotating nozzles that I was referring to earlier that are actually somewhat more compatible with single stream rotators. And we have also the good old, just for a quick promo, high efficiency toilet that is still a rebate that's in effect. The smart controllers and the toilets need to be WaterSense labeled. WaterSense is the EPA program similar to Energy Star that is a product labeling program that guarantees that these products have been third-party certified and tested for performance and efficiency. They don't actually rate the multi-stream rotating nozzles, so that's not a criteria there. But it's a great program. For more information, you can always go to the WaterSense site and look at the range of products that they certify and find out, use that to select the right product for you. Some of the benefits of weather-based smart irrigation controllers, they really help, as I mentioned earlier, keep your landscape healthy and beautiful and stay healthy by watering only when the plants need it, and preventing or under or overwatering based on actual weather conditions. Convenience. In order to work efficiently, standard controllers need to be programmed manually and adjusted manually across the watering season. Smart controllers take the guesswork out of programming and automatically adjust the amount of water applied as weather conditions change. So, as I mentioned earlier, instead of having to calculate a base schedule, the new weather-based controllers are generally integrated with a smart device and will guide you through the installation process to ask you several questions about each zone. Different parameters like what type of plant material are we watering, turf or trees or shrubs? What type of sprinklers are we using? Pop-up spray heads or multi-stream rotators or single stream rotators? What is the typical sun exposure? Is it full sun, partial sun, shade? What type of soils do we have? Is it low, good, high quality, fast draining, loamy soil, or more likely in our area, is it clay soil? And then finally, slope. Are we on a steep slope or a flat slope? You know, things that are much more intuitive for the typical homeowner user to enter in and understand and know what to program, as opposed to precipitation rates and head spacing and things like that nature. Based on the parameters that you put in there, a schedule is automatically generated and again, automatically adjusted across the irrigation season to attain the greatest degree of efficiency. Connectivity, another great feature that people really love and conservation technicians just also appreciate, again, is the integration of these smart devices. Many of these new applications can be set to send alerts in the form of text messages or push alerts that can notify you in the event of a system malfunction or a leak. So it connects the users to their systems to a degree that we just haven't seen in the last 20 years, and it's really having a really big impact in terms of customer engagement. Potential cost savings, efficient use of smart controllers can really help avoid high water bills during the summer. Again, the time when most of us are using the most water. That all depends on how you are irrigating previously. You know, if you have an existing landscape and you haven't put a lot of energy or thought into maintaining it or adjusting the schedule in the last few years, you've got a great opportunity to save as much as 30% by implementing a smart controller if things are in a good state of maintenance. If you're installing a brand new landscape and you haven't really done much irrigating in the past, you're not going to, you're going to be using more water than you did in the past. So your bill's not going to go down, but this is going to give you create the conditions to use water as efficiently as possible and get the maximum enjoyment out of your new landscape. Regional water supply management, using water efficiently at home, promotes regional conservation efforts and helps water providers manage the region's water supply. Excuse me. And again, TVWD offers a $50 rebate for WaterSense labeled units, and prices they range quite a bit, but the starting price point for homeowner models that are WaterSense labeled starts at $50 and goes up from there. In terms of the multi-stream rotating nozzles or the high efficiency sprinkler nozzles, some of the great benefits are that these types of nozzles have excellent what we call distribution uniformity, or the even application of water over the given area. They have what was called automatically matched precipitation rate, even when you make adjustments to the radius or the arc, as we talked about earlier. These types of nozzles come with a little tool to make adjustment really simple. So when we talk about adjusting the arc, that's where we're saying, for example, a quarter circle or a half circle or a full circle. As you make those type of adjustments, and if you adjust the radius, the distance that water is going out from the center of the nozzle, bringing that in or expanding that out, the precipitation rate within the zone stays the same, and that's really important from, again, the standpoint of even application of water across the given zone that you're watering. These types of nozzles have they apply water much slower, and the primary benefit to that is that in our area we tend to have landscapes that have slopes and clay soils, which are much more prone to runoff, because slopes, obviously the water tends to run off just that slope, but then clay soils, it takes longer for water to infiltrate clay soils. And so these sprinklers can really help overcome that challenge by putting down water in a way that the soils can take up. Rotating streams are much more wind resistant compared to a typical pop-up spray pattern, and so these types of nozzles can help overcome that wind drift and can eliminate the waste associated with that. These nozzles have a greater degree of radius adjustment and operating pressure that we talked about earlier compared to the traditional pop-up spray heads. So they can really help you overcome some deficiencies that are pretty common in terms of head spacing in landscapes. We tend to recommend that you want to have ideally what's called head-to-head spacing, where water from one sprinkler is hitting the sprinkler next to it, and so on and so on, and that's how you achieve a really uniform coverage. And irrigation is not an exact science, to say the least, and oftentimes we see some deficiencies in that spacing, and these types of nozzles can really help you overcome some of those constructed deficiencies and get the most out of a system with relatively minor repair. And again, TVWD offers rebates for these multi-stream nozzles. It's $3 per nozzle for a maximum of 32, and typical retail price, depending on where you get them, is generally around the $7 range. So it's a pretty generous rebate for a really fantastic product. Transitioning into some of the services and resources that are available to customers in our area for TVWD. We offer high water use assessments. Myself, Steve, I'm the conservation technician. So again, in the summer months, I'm often working with our customers to address high water bill concerns. We'll have a conversation. I can review your bill, and in some cases, if the conditions warrant, we may be able to arrange for an on-site assessment, both indoor and outdoor, depending on the conditions we find in a conversation. We offer complimentary high efficiency water devices in terms of shower heads, kitchen and bath aerators, and toilet leak test tablets. And you can request those by going to the website and simply filling out the request form, and we'll get those out to you as soon as possible. Again, we have the rebates, and there's a rebate page on the website that has a lot more information. You can download the application forms and send those in to us as well. Another great resource is our water efficient demonstration garden located at 1850 Southwest 170th. That site has been constructed basically to provide a self-guided tours and information at our kiosk. We have plant lists available if you see something that you like and you're interested in for your yard, and you can pick up a copy of the water efficient plants for the Willamette Valley booklet, which is a great resource for customers that are looking for ideas on water efficient plants that are not going to be invasive problems in our area as well. As members of the Regional Water Providers Consortium, we also lean on the RWPC website very heavily in terms of being a clearinghouse for a wide array of indoor and outdoor water efficiency, emergency preparedness tips, and downloadable brochures. There is a ton of how-to videos on things like how to read your water meter, how to adjust your sprinklers, things that we talked about here earlier. I don't expect you're going to get a lot of proficiency out of our quick discussion, but there's how-to videos that'll show you how to do that, how to set your irrigation controller, and much, much more. There's the weekly watering number. If you have a traditional irrigation controller, that's a tool that'll help you set a base schedule of 1 inch a week, and we will send you an email once a week on how to make a simple one-step adjustment to your program that will recalibrate it so that you are making a simple weather-based adjustment across the irrigation season. So again, you're applying the right amount of water according to current weather conditions. They also have some great spring and fall irrigation setup and turn-off checklists. We will actually attach those to the PDF of this presentation for folks that are in attendance for your review later on. Next, we'd like to segue into some emerging technologies that we are seeing on the horizon that we are seeing in our systems. And so we'd just like to make folks aware of some opportunities and some things to keep in mind with these devices. So these new devices are things that you can attach to your water meter or your service line that help customers track and modify their water use. At a customer level, this first device that you see actually straps directly to the water meter and then connects via Wi-Fi in the cloud to an app or a smart device. And retails for about $200. The meter actually will monitor the water flow at a 5-second resolution, and so you have a great opportunity to basically monitor in real time the water use and set up for real-time leak alerts. You can then review and set water budgets for how much water you've been using month to month, year to year. And it's just a great way to get an idea of how much water you're using at home. And in the event of a leak is really a great prompt to take some action. This device is really a low impact and an easy installation, and therefore that's why you see the lower price point of about, again, $200. Important thing to note on this device is that because this specific unit straps directly to a water meter, the district may need to remove this type of device to perform regular maintenance or reading activities, and we can't be responsible for reinstallation or any damage that may be associated with these type of activities. Another very similar type of device that we are seeing are these Flow and Streamlabs products, and the key difference here is that they actually are installed directly on the water service line, and so therefore it's not something that a typical homeowner is going to take on themselves. The cost range is about more like $500 to $600, and that doesn't include any professional installation costs that may be incurred. The key difference that these devices provide is that they actually incorporate a type of shutoff device. So in the event of a high water use notification or a leak, you actually have the ability to remotely turn off your water device remotely, and that's something that that's a functionality that you don't have in the previously mentioned device. So in the next slide, Tom's going to be speaking about the district's direction looking forward in terms of advanced metering infrastructure in the future. these devices that we're talking about can perhaps provide a viable interim solution for customers that may wish to have access to that type of information, a much more granular level of household water use data in the near term. And so with that, we're going to segue back over to Tom and take it away, Tom.
Thank you, Steve. So we want to make sure we leave some time for questions here. But real quickly, we are looking to invest in advanced metering infrastructure, or otherwise known as AMI. This is something that is widely used in the gas industry, the electric industry, and it's becoming a bigger issue within the water industry now. And what the other devices that Steve just mentioned, while those provide you valuable information, that information doesn't make it back to the district. So the AMI, what it does is it actually allows the district to get a much higher resolution of data on water use, be able to inform any of our customers of any potential leaks that we're picking up or seeing in the system, and it does help protect our system. So this is something we've put in the budget. We're pursuing infrastructure funds for this as well to do this. This is not going to happen overnight. This is going to probably take us a number of years to implement and do, but we are headed in this direction. So with this, I would like to turn this over to Justin Dyke. He is our outreach and engagement coordinator, and he's going to field our questions here. He's going to direct them to the who should answer them. So Justin?
Thanks, Tom. Yep, I'll be moderating the Q&A for today, and the first handful of these are going to go to Steve. I think they're quite on topic. First one, Steve. Is there a DIY filter or to filter to reuse water from the sink and use it in the garden?
Wow, well, that's kind of what we call from the filter from the sink to use it in the garden. So it sounds like we're talking about a gray water use, and that's not necessarily something that I have a lot of experience with in terms of dealing with, and there are rules that I think are more associated with the state in terms of the requirements that you need to follow in terms of doing any type of gray water system or household reuse. So I will always point folks towards the Oregon Health Authority in terms of the starting point. And if you're looking at that type of system, don't want to discourage anyone from pursuing that type of activity, but it's really more of a water reuse question rather than a potable water efficiency question. But always encourage folks to pursue those types of activities, but it's not necessarily something that we specialize or that I have a lot of answers for at TVWD.
And if I could just weigh in real quick on that, definitely work with a plumber on that, because there are definitely state plumbing codes involved with gray water reuse, and we have to make sure that there's no accidental connection to the drinking water potable system.
Thanks there, Tom and Steve. Steve, your next one is, what is a good watering schedule? How does the weather guided system make decisions about how much to water?
Well, it really depends. I mean, that's a question everybody always has, and every landscapes are sort of like a fingerprint. They're all different, and so are the systems that apply water to them. The key thing to keep in mind is that we want to encourage folks to water more deeply and less frequently. So if you're able to apply water across the week, the general rule is about an inch per week. If you can water, 2 or 3 days a week, certainly as opposed to every day a week, that is generally just not necessary unless you're trying to water potted plants and things like that. Again, the general rule of thumb in our area across the season is 1 inch per week. And in terms of the weather-based irrigation systems, again, they're fantastic because they take the parameters of what type of sprinkler systems do you have. If it's an automatic system, what type of sprinkler is it, and it knows the precipitation rate, what type of plant material are we watering. It knows that sort of a plant watering requirement, and again, soil conditions, slope conditions, sun exposure, and it uses all those different parameters to make a calculate of what is the term is evapotranspiration, is the fancy word of how much water is being evaporated from the soil and transpired through the plants according to the current weather conditions. And that's the amount of water that we're trying to put back into the system to keep your plants happy and healthy. That's what the smart controllers are doing. Now, if you have a typical system and you're wondering, where do I start? A good place to start, and this is just very, very general, for pop-up spray nozzles, again, if it's uniform in a zone, start with about 10 minutes per cycle. And if you have single stream rotators, 20 minutes or a little bit more, and then do it every other day. And if you find that your plants are happy and healthy, try and ratchet that down. Effective irrigation requires good management. It's not something that even with the best technology, you can't just set it and forget it if you want to have good results. So pay attention to things. If things are looking good and healthy, maybe try and shave a couple minutes off, or maybe try another gap day in between watering cycles to see how your plants tolerate that. A little bit of what we call managed stress is not necessarily a bad thing. That's your indicator when the landscape needs a little more water. So hopefully those parameters help point you in the right direction.
All right, and Steve, your next one comes from a customer named Mike. He says, I just replaced my controller with a smart controller and all my shrub sprinklers with drip irrigation lines. My question is how to figure out how much time I should program for my shrubbery so it gets the right amount of water without over or under watering.
Drip can be a little bit tricky just because there are just so many more options in terms of the different types of emitters. So the place to start, if it were me, is to sort of figure out, are we talking about drip tubing that has in-light emitters that are at a certain spacing and that each emitter, has a certain flow rate? The big difference between drip and traditional sprinklers is that instead of talking in gallons per minute, we're talking more about gallons per hour. And so it's important to understand, again, what do I have? Is it a consistent matrix of drip line that you can sort of get a good handle of what is the application rate across the given area, or is it a combination of a myriad different types of emitters that have various flow rates? The best advice I can give you is to determine what is the most dominant or most predominant type of emitter that you have through that zone, and then use that as your what your input for that smart controller. Or the other approach is to say, I'm going to use what is the most restrictive emitter I have, and that because that's going to then make sure that you're providing adequate water. If you water to the most generous emitter, then you're probably going to be underwatering in the areas where you have a more restrictive. So in that, you're going to have to work with that zone to strike a balance. And again, this is where you really want to read your manual and perhaps reach out to the technical support for your given controller to really help you dial in on your drip zone so that you've got it set, because there usually is a higher degree of user settings that can really help you do that, and the technical experts can really kind of help you perform some tricks sometimes that are maybe not necessarily as intuitive in the initial setup.
Thank you, Steve. And as a reminder, we're bumping up against our scheduled stop time, but we will stay on and answer everyone's questions, and we'll post a video of this Q&A and the entire presentation later. So if anyone hasn't gotten their question answered and has to leave, you can always check back and watch the video and make sure you get Steve's great answers. Steve, our next one comes from a customer named Scott. He asks, what do you do if you have a tree that is making everything dry under the tree, but the rest of the lawn is sufficiently watered?
Boy, that's tough. We have similar conditions, out in our demonstration garden where we've got the large Doug firs, and then a alternative turf area directly below it. You can literally see the portion where the root zone is and the canopy where it's kind of a steely blue as opposed to a vibrant green, and it's really a challenge. And that's a great example of why zoning your irrigation system, if possible, according to the different microclimates that you're going to have in your landscape is really important. Without somehow separating the zone, it's going to be really tricky to do that in a uniform way. Now, when we talked earlier about having different types of sprinklers have dramatically different application rates, what you may be able to do in that situation is say is, okay, the sprinklers that are in the lawn that are not impacted by the tree, I will leave them at a lower application rate, but maybe I convert the sprinklers that are under the tree zone or in the root zone to the pop-up sprays that are going to have a higher precipitation rate. And so on the same zone, I'm going to end up putting down a little bit more water in that area than I will on the others. So again, we have these rules of thumb for an ideally constructed system that you may have to get creative if you've got an existing landscape that you're not prepared to redesign and rebuild. And there's some ways to do that if you just start getting familiar with the different types of products that are available to you. The other thing you can consider doing is there are conversion kits where you can convert pop-up spray systems to do essentially drip applications. There are really tons of products out there that are available to help you, do some high degree of customization to irrigation. So, getting out there, going and visiting some of the sprinkler supply shops is really a great way to learn about some of these other products that are maybe not your traditional or best management options, but ways to overcome tricky situations like that.
Awesome. And we're going to let you get a drink of water here or something, Steve, and finally have a question for someone else. Next one's going to be for our customer service and billing lead, Carissa. The question is, what are the typical monthly water bills for single family homes? Last summer, I was traveling and my monthly bill was over $200 despite little usage.
Thank you, Justin. So with our water bills, we do bill for both water and sewer, and it is bi-monthly. So just keep in mind that's 2 months. The average typical water bill monthly is roughly $56.33. So that would be roughly $102.66 for 2 months. And then once you add on the sewer usage. So if the average customer used between 14 and 16 units of water, including the water and the sewer, we're looking at the bill being roughly between $200 to $250 for that bi-monthly bill. The summer months, of course, are going to fluctuate that. Any water consumption change, if you use more water, less water, we would see a drop or an increase in that. And then also the sewer usage charge that changes annually for the full year. If there are additional questions on that, if it doesn't seem as if your bill was right last summer, I would highly recommend giving us a call so that we can look specifically at your account and see if there was anything that looks off, although the amount that I see here in the question looks right about average for a 2-month billing cycle.
Thanks, Carissa. Our next question is going to be for our field customer service lead, Mike Edian. Mike, question here comes from a gentleman named Scott. From reading literature on irrigation, they mentioned that municipal water pressure may vary over the course of the day. For example, go down during high use and be higher during the night. Is that the case for TVWD? How much does pressure vary during the day within our district?
Thanks, Justin, for that. Great question. We do receive that question quite a bit. throughout a district, and we do have different pressure zones located sporadically throughout the district. So depending on where you live, you have a static pressure, so to speak, that's dependent on where the reservoir sits and where your house sits. Fluctuation does occur. Typically, it does not fluctuate more than 5 psi throughout the day. In the summer months, you may see that 5 psi fluctuation because there's a heavier drawdown on our reservoirs on our system during the summer months. But typically, I'd say a safe guess amount is 5 psi throughout the day. So you shouldn't see more than that. Typically, anything over 80 psi, we recommend that you as a customer have a PRV, which is a pressure reducing valve, located behind the meter on your customer side line, and that will help keep the pressure lower than what we would be providing at the service if it is over 80. Most of there's a lot of our system that is less than 80. 60, as Steve had mentioned prior in his presentation, is sort of the ideal pressure that homeowners like to see within their system. And again, being said, with irrigation systems, that can be a little bit higher than what you want. But PRVs are the tool to install in your line to reduce that pressure. And yeah, there you go. The 5 psi throughout the day is about what you'll see throughout the day in fluctuation. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you, Mike. And Steve, you are back up for our next one from a customer. Says, for people who don't have irrigation systems, any tips or resources for the most effective types and uses of regular varieties of hose-attached sprinklers?
Thanks, Justin. Well, I've always really, in terms of doing the sort of manual hose dragging approach, I've always liked the oscillating sprinklers that sort of rainbow back and forth, the kind you like to play with, play in as a kid. But really, not so much the type of sprinkler in that case, but incorporating some sort of a timer device to your hose spigot to regulate that. It's so easy to set, and next thing you know, you're distracted and you've ended up letting your sprinkler go twice as long, or you forget, and it runs all night. So just really would recommend, regardless of the type of sprinkler that you use, incorporate some sort of a timer, and they're really inexpensive. And in fact, there are spigot timers now that are WaterSense labeled that are considered smart controllers. So even that type of product has really come leaps and bounds in just recently in terms of the ability to be much more efficient. I'm a little skeptical about that, just because those types of systems are much more mobile in terms of their smart application and how consistent that can really be. But again, the most important thing is some sort of timer that can help you shut it off when you intend to shut it off, based on a reasonable schedule. And one other thing too is if you're doing that, we will advocate to add some sort of an anti-siphon valve between the spigot and your sprinkler, just to prevent any sort of backflow or back siphoning into the public water supply or in the home.
Fantastic. And our last question that I see posted here is from a customer named John. Asks, can you repeat where the efficiency demonstration garden is located? And in the chat, we've put the address for the district office where that garden is, 1850 Southwest 170th Ave in Beaverton. That's where you can put in for Google, take you to our parking lot. It's at the corner of 170th and Merlot in Beaverton. Steve, anything special you want to say about the efficiency demonstration garden?
Not really, other than it's there for you 365, 24/7 if you wish. It is more enjoyable in the daylight hours, I'll say, but it really was built to provide an opportunity for self-guided tours. There's labels throughout the garden now with COVID and our absence from the office. things may not be as labeled as they have been in the past, but we do have plant lists available, and we do provide the Willamette plants for the Willamette Valley at the information kiosk, and there's some interpretive signage throughout the garden that can certainly help you get some good effective takeaways in terms of the 7 steps to water efficient landscape. That is something that we've always promoted. So visit anytime. You know, we when things get back to normal and we're back at the office and we can interact with our customers, we really look forward to the opportunity to re-engage with customers in terms of walking through and answering questions about the garden, and even scheduling tours with small groups. That's not something we can do just yet, but if that's something that you're interested in, let us know, and we'll let you know when we're able to do that again.
Awesome. And that is it for the Q&A. Thanks again for all these great questions from our customers. Thanks to Steve and Mike and Carissa for being available with your expertise. And a reminder, all of our customers that are able to join us today, thank you so much for your time. We'll be posting the YouTube video of this presentation of Talkin' Water here shortly, in case you want to hear some of this information again or gather Steve's contact information for your summer watering efficiency questions and demos and everything else that we're able to offer. And thanks again for your time, everyone. This concludes today's edition of Talkin' Water.